Is it playing? Can you hear? Is it through the speaker? So inshallah, this is a quote from Otto von Bismarck. He was the Imperial Chancellor of Germany in the 1880s. So please just read that, familiarize yourself with that quote. April 6th, 1992. The sound of gunfire and explosions cascade upon the inhabitants of a city whose nickname became the Jerusalem of Europe. This city, Sarajevo. For 4 long, brutal years, this city was under constant siege by the Republic of Srpska. This city was under siege by the Republic of Srpska, an entity which consists of mainly ethnic Serbs living in Bosnia. No inch of this city remained untouched by the horrors of war. Every wall, every street, every mosque, every brick bears the resemblance of this terrifying incident, this terrifying conflict which scarred the city almost 27 years ago from now. But how did Bosnia transcend into medieval Barbary? How did it transcend from being one of the most multicultural, cosmopolitan cities in Europe to this bloodbath of agony and genocide? This is a presentation on Bosnia's darkest chapter. From the onslaught of World War I to the longest siege in modern history. So before I do start, I need to introduce myself. My name is Tagari. I'm doing a bachelor's degree in history and international relations. I have studied history at higher education for 6 years now, alhamdulillah. And as well as this, I am also a video journalist. And when I say video journalist, it's very similar to journalism, like the BBC, but instead I am completely independent. I don't work for a company. I do work with organizations, and for this particular event, I worked with Remembering of Srebrenica, an organization which helps remember the genocide which took place in Bosnia. But alhamdulillah, video journalism allows me to go to different places like this, go to war zones and places like this to learn, experience, and sort of take in history. Because although history is a subject which we can learn, we can read books, we can look at the facts and statistics, it's also a study which we have to actually experience firsthand. You can't just learn a conflict by reading a book and that's it, close a book and that's it. History is a subject which is visual, and we have to go to these countries which history happened, and we have to go to these countries and learn about things and speak with people who actually was involved in these conflicts. Now, why on earth am I talking about Bosnia today? What relevance does it have to us Muslims here? Well, the thing about Bosnia is that the war was only 27 years ago from today, and the absolute barbarity, the bloodbath and the genocide which took place in this country is extremely worrying, considering that it was only 27 years ago from now. If you actually study this conflict, which inshallah we'll discuss later on, you'll understand that it sounds as if it was something from the 1930s, the 1940s. It sounds as if this happened during World War II, but this is an event which many people in this room still remember. If you're over the age of 30, if you're over the age of 40, you remember these conflicts unfolding live. And sadly, unfortunate for the Muslim community, we don't actually understand what happened. The only thing we sort of understand is that Muslims died, okay, and we moved on. We don't understand why this conflict happened. And the sad thing about this conflict is that it's not ended. It was just frozen. It's not resolved. And in my personal opinion, if we do see another war in the Balkans, it's going to be in Bosnia. And we'll learn about why that's actually will happen, or inshallah it won't. But we'll discuss about the long-lasting impacts and the aftermath of the war. And so I went to Bosnia, alhamdulillah, and it wasn't a holiday. A lot of people said, oh, how was your holiday? It definitely was not a holiday. It was much more than a holiday. And to be honest, it was very emotional. It was very psychologically traumatic in my experience, because of the places I went to, the places which our Muslim brothers and sisters died. Our Muslim brothers all the way from, ethnically from Europe, had died for the cause of Islam here in this city. And it's, I went there and you see the bullet holes in almost every single wall. You speak with people who went through unbearable amounts of pain, and you can't help but cry. And along this trip, I don't usually cry a lot, but I found myself crying on every single Qabristan that I walked past, every single person that I met. And the fact that the fact that the conflict was so recent means that a lot of the people that you walk past on a daily basis, the old people, have gone through so much, yet you just walk past them as if they're an ordinary person. So like I said, it was not easy. And the location that I went to, alhamdulillah, I got to experience what the war would have felt like, and I got the chance of speaking with a lot of people who survived the genocide. So the Bosnian War, the Yugoslav War, which is from the 1990s, round about to 1995, 1996, it's a very, very complex series of events. So complex that people have joked and nicknamed it the quantum Balkan theory. Essentially, it just describes how complex this series of events is. Like, you think you've understood the conflict, and then boom, you hit with another piece of information which you go, wow, okay, that just changed my entire perspective on the matter. So, this lecture, this presentation now is not going to be a super in-depth presentation of how Bosnia would enter this darkest chapter, but instead it's a summary, and I will provide, if you want, through email or whatever, WhatsApp, I can provide you with all the resources that I've used for my research for this project. And you can do your own research, because the idea of whole lectures, if you go to university, lectures aren't a thing which gives you every single detail and everything. It's something which will give you a brief summary of it, and then you're left to do your own research on the matter. So do forgive me if, because this is the very first time I'm giving a talk like this, so do please forgive me if I do make mistakes, and you can blame Maulana if I do make any mistakes for giving me the opportunity to be here. So when we talk about the Balkans, what is the Balkans, where is the Balkans, and how on earth did it become a majority? Well, at least how did Bosnia become Muslims? How did the Muslims end up in Bosnia? So this is the region of the Balkans, as you can see here. Please familiarize yourself with the map of Bosnia. I do love my maps, so you will be seeing a lot of maps in this presentation. So Bosnia is in Eastern Europe. It's part of the Balkans. Balkans is a region similar to Europe. It's a region, it's not a country, it's a region. And the Balkans consist of the countries of Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia, Herzegovina, Serbia, Montenegro, Albania, Macedonia, Greece, Bulgaria, Romania, and also northern Turkey. Now familiarize yourself with the map. The green is Bosnia and Herzegovina, so that's the Balkans. That's a little bit on the background of that. So when we mention Islam in the Balkans, we tend to think, oh, okay, the Ottomans were the first one to introduce Islam into the Balkans. That is actually not entirely correct. The first sort of connections between Islam and the Balkans first originated from Arab traders in the 7th century. They were Arab traders who traded with the Bosnians, but there is not enough sufficient evidence to to say that they settled here and had settlements here. However, the first sort of interactions between Islam and Bosnia obviously first became apparent with the Ottoman Empire. Now we all know about the Ottoman Empire, a beautiful map there of the Ottoman Empire there. So the Ottoman Empire obviously was the largest, or one of the largest and most influential empires in history. It spanned all the way from Turkey to modern-day Vienna, which is in Austria. So when the Ottomans reached Bosnia in the late 1300s, it marked the beginning of a new era for the Bosnians. By 1389, the Serbs were defeated in, interestingly enough, the fields of Kosovo, which is now recently was a war front, which we'll discuss hopefully later. But in 1453, Muhammad al-Fatih did something which shook Christendom. Constantinople, the heart of the Byzantine Empire, the city which was nicknamed the New Rome, the city which was the heart of the Eastern Orthodox Church, falls to the Muslims in 1453, almost 1,000 years after Rasulullah ﷺ prophesied the fall of Constantinople. Now, how did this allow the Ottomans to reach the Balkans? Well, essentially it enabled the Ottomans to have a land route to the Balkans, and would therefore eventually allow the Ottomans to reach to the depths of the Balkans. So only 10 years after Muhammad al-Fatih conquered Constantinople, in 1463, the Ottomans therefore annexed Bosnia. It was already in the region at the time, but it fully annexed Bosnia in 1463. So the Ottomans brought with it an era of cultural diversity, religious tolerance, which had never been seen in Europe at the time. And a lot of Islamophobes sort of had this idea that, oh, Islam spread by the sword. Here we have a prime example of why that is literally not the case. This is the pictures of Sarajevo, and when I say Sarajevo, I mean it's the capital city of Bosnia. And it was first established by the Ottomans. So, like I said, the Ottomans brought with it an era of cultural diversity, and that's important because the Balkans, as I showed you before, consist of many different ethnicities. You have the Slovenes, the Croats, the Serbs. Let's actually discuss about the Serbs. So the Serbs, Serbia, is an Orthodox run, so it's Orthodox Christianity. The Croatians are Catholic Christians, and obviously Bosnia is Muslim. So we just bear that in mind before we do get into the nitty-gritty stuff. So the Ottomans, to ensure stability in this very ethnically, cultural, diverse location, it allowed somewhat of a freedom when it came to governance. So they had, and they introduced a system called the millet system. Essentially, it would allow local tribes to govern themselves according to their own sort of religious juries. So the Christians could be tried in a Christian court, Muslims could be tried in a Muslim court, the Jews could be tried in the Jewish court. And this idea of a millet system had been around since the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And it gave minority religious communities within the empire that sort of religious freedom. And like I said, Sarajevo became the heart of Bosnia. It became the meeting point between East and West. So Jews, you may be wondering how on earth did Jews end up in Bosnia? Well, the Ottomans had a policy of giving safe haven to Jews who were recently persecuted in Spain. So Spain, which was once controlled by the Muslims. So the Jews were persecuted in Spain, and the Ottomans turned around and said, listen, we have a policy of cultural diversity. If you would like, we will give you safe haven and safe passage to the Balkans, to the Ottoman Balkans. And by 1581, the first synagogue was built by the Muslims, by the way, in Sarajevo, in the capital city of Sarajevo, and you can still see it to this day. And scattered around this city is mosques. Like, you turn one way and you see a bunch of Austro-Hungarian architecture, typical European architecture. Then you turn right and you see Ottoman mosques, like you see in this picture here. And it's incredible because not only do you have this sort of this influence from the Ottomans in terms of architecture, but you also have a lot of the food is inspired by the different cultures which resided in Sarajevo. So I had a friend, his name is Mirza, alhamdulillah, really nice man. He showed me around and took me around to have some food at some typical Bosnian restaurants. And he showed me the food and the culture. And in one dish, there was an Albanian dish. And he gave me another plate, and there was a Turkish dish, there was baklava. There was so many different foods from different regions of the world. And I found it's one of the most peculiar cities I think I've ever been to. So then you may be wondering, okay, how did Islam spread in Bosnia? Was it forced? Was it not forced? Well, the thing is, like I mentioned before, the Orthodox and the Catholics were at loggerheads with one another, and Bosnia found itself in the middle of this. So this is before the Ottomans came. So those Bosnians had sort of gotten tired of being a war front between Catholicism and the Orthodox Church, and had found contentment with Islam. Some of the people, of course, they became Muslims because of the environmental benefits that it possessed, but also some Bosnians became Muslim because it simply was more appealing, and the idea of unification and brotherhood was more appealing than the clashes and the conflicts and the rivalry between the Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church. And by the 17th century, the majority of the Bosnians would become Muslim. So Sarajevo was nicknamed Jerusalem of Europe, and it's the only place in Europe in which you can see all 5 different cultures mixed. You have the Orthodox Church, the Catholic Church, Judaism, and the Muslims. Now onto a little bit of like the Galguzari section of this. So this is my favorite masjid in Sarajevo. Now you may think this masjid is like a very nice and luxurious masjid. It's far from it. It's a masjid very, very high up in the peaks of Sarajevo. And this was my first time I recorded myself. Not part of the documentary, but I just felt like I needed to record myself and my first experiences traveling to a mosque in Bosnia. So this masjid is very, very high up, by the way, in the hills of Sarajevo, completely out of touch with civilization almost. And I walked into the masjid. Nobody was there. It was dark. The lights were closed. And I heard the adhan, and when I heard the adhan, I was very, very shocked because a kid, a 10-year-old kid, was doing adhan. So in this video, you can see me like, what on earth? I was so confused because you don't hear that often. And then I heard a knock on the window behind me. And if you know about Ottoman mosques, they have the Jamaat kind of like this, and they also have a side room on the side where they do tasbihad, where they do the adhan. But because this masjid was so far up in the mountains, there's little people to obviously occupy the masjid. So instead they use this small room to pray as a Jamaat kind of, and obviously, you know, they can't heat up the entire masjid, so they heat up this small room. So this old man knocks on the window. I look behind me, he's like, oh no, he's probably going to tell me off for recording. And I turned around and he's inviting me. He says, come, in his very broken English. I come and I sit down, and the floor is really nice and heated, but this room is really small, by the way. And I ask him, like, who is this little kid doing the adhan? And he said, this is my grandson. So this person, the old man, was about 70. And Ajib, you know, this became one of my favorite masjids because of the brotherhood and the experiences I felt in this masjid. You know, this old man, I was later told that he was doing intermittent fasting like Dawood alayhi salam for 35 years. So since the age of 19, he's been doing fasts on and off, one fast a day. He fasts and then he breaks his fast the next day. He was doing that for 35 years, even during the siege of Sarajevo, even during the war. And Ajib, when I found out this information, I thought, this mosque is next level. This is incredible. And as the days go on, you know, I purposely went to this masjid every Isha just to pray in this masjid. I climbed up 15 minutes just to go up to this masjid to meet these people, and they were very, very welcoming. The Muslims here, whenever they see someone who's obviously not foreign, because obviously I'm brown and the majority of the Muslims in Bosnia are white, when they see us, you know, despite me not knowing them, despite them being strangers to me, they welcome you very warmly, and they give you a hug, and it's really, really sort of a very heartwarming sort of experience. And on the last day, I sort of, so whenever you finish your salah in Bosnia and also the Ottoman, in Turkey as well, they have this really nice habit where they all shake each other's hands, they say salam, they hug each other. And like this, I think we should do this in our masjid, to be honest, because whenever we pray our sunnahs and witr, we just, boom, we're out, straight out the mosque doors. We don't really say salam, but it's such a good habit because the amount of sawab that you're getting every time you shake someone's hand is ajib. It's amazing. So as I shake these people's hands, they're giving me warm smiles, and alhamdulillah, it's just me on my own. And I sat down with these people on the last day that I was in Bosnia, and I bought them some baklava, because what else do you buy people in Bosnia? Because they really like baklava. So I sat with them for hours, and here I am surrounded by 5 or 6 different Bosnian people I've never met in my entire life, yet I feel as if these people are my family, these people are my brothers. And to know what these people have experienced in their life, it just adds to that experience of interacting with these people. And I just sat there for hours, we're just eating our baklava in this small room in the peaks of Sarajevo, and Ajib, it's an incredible experience, something that you can only experience once you go there. And it's how Islam and the Ummah works. Without this Ummah, without Islam connecting us, you know, I don't have any connection with these people, yet I feel as if they're my brothers, and this is what Islam is. This is what Islam is all about. So, I'll show you the quick video, if I can get the sound up maybe. So you can see I'm slightly confused. So the kid does adhan, and I sit down with the old man. This is the old man, really, really nice man. So alhamdulillah, that's my favorite masjid. And funnily enough, okay, I don't know if anybody knows who this man is. Does anybody know who this man is? No? So he turns out in this masjid, the day after I first met the old man and the son, by the way, the grandson, these two duos, this grandson and grandchild, every single salah, they come 20 minutes before and they open the masjid. And that kid does adhan every single day. Now, because there's nobody there to give adhan, the child does give the adhan. I'm not sure, like, the religious sort of perspective on that. Someone can give me that talk to me about that later. But when I was so a few days after that, I was in the streets of Sarajevo. I was coming back from a cable car ride to the mountains, and you hear the adhan echo in Sarajevo. Sarajevo is in a valley, so you hear the adhan echo, and all throughout these different voices, you hear this one child giving adhan. So the adhan is projected out loud. You could hear this child giving adhan. And it's really, really sort of a heartwarming thing to listen to this sweet voice. So this man here is Mustafa Isakovic. He is one of the most influential, he is one of the most famous Bosnian nasheed artists and Quran reciters, in fact in Eastern Europe as a whole. And here he was in this small masjid in the peaks of Sarajevo. And I was very confused that he was here, but alhamdulillah, I met him, and his voice is very, very immaculate. I'll let you...
Okay, my name is Mustafa Isakovic. I am a professor of Islamic theology here in Sarajevo, graduated in the Faculty of Islamic Sciences, and I am formerly
That's the fan.
delighted to meet Brother Harris today in Sarajevo, and I would like to welcome all of you in Sarajevo. Sarajevo is one beautiful, open city to many different cultures, religious ethnicities. Maybe you don't know, but this city is famous under the name European Jerusalem. وقالوا الحمد لله الذي صدقنا وعده وأورثنا الأرض نتبوأ من الجنة حيث نشاء فنعم أجر العاملين وترى الملائكة حافين من حول العرش يسبحون بحمد ربهم وقضي.
Okay, so this is the masjid. We'll get onto that later. So now, end of the Ottomans. How on earth did let's jump right straight to the end of the Ottoman rule in the Balkans? So you may be wondering now, how did Bosnia enter this darkest chapter that I keep rambling on about? Well, it becomes apparent with the emergence of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Now, this empire is an empire which stretches from Austria to Hungary, hence the name. It no longer is a thing. It was abolished after the war, after World War I. But the Ottoman rule will not last for long, because up here is the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and the Christians are no longer content with Ottoman rule, and now they want to sort of align themselves with the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which is a sort of relatively Christian empire. And by the 1870s, independence movements had withered away Ottoman control over the region, which had lasted almost up to 500 years. So in 1878, the Ottomans lose control over Bosnia. The empire, which is the Austro-Hungarian Empire, did make great leaps to sort of weave into the fabric of the empire the Muslims, but obviously there was some extent of bullying, and the Muslims did become second-class citizens, but the transition of power was almost seamless. But once again, the presence of yet another empire in Europe was bound to stir up some sort of controversy, was bound to stir up some sort of conflict. And as we read before, right at the beginning, the quote from Otto von Bismarck, that this area of the Balkans was bound to create some sort of conflict. And as you can see on the map, Serbia is not part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Please bear this in mind. But Bosnia is. It was annexed in 1908 by the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Now, Bosnia's darkest chapter begins here on the hot summer's day of June 28th, 1914, a date engraved in history. Can anybody tell me why? But what about this city?
Assassination of Archduke.
Cheated. Yes, correct. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Now, it is a very complex topic, and I don't have enough time to fully go into detail, but I will give a summary. So, to cut it short, the person on the left is Gavrilo Princip. The person on the right is Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Now, Gavrilo Princip is a Serb nationalist, meaning he wants his whole idea of assassinating the man on the right was because he wanted to sort of take away the Austro-Hungarian control of the Balkans. Gavrilo Princip wanted to unite the Slavic states. As we saw before, he wanted a South Slavic state, also known as Yugoslavia. He had this idea of having a greater Serbian state as well, uniting all the ethnic Serbs in the Balkans. The man on the right is none other than Archduke Franz Ferdinand. He was the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne. So Princip had thought, by assassinating Archduke Franz Ferdinand, he imagined that this would relieve Bosnia of its Austro-Hungarian influence, therefore allowing the Slavs to unite each other and sort of have this sort of brotherhood where they unite under one state. That's obviously not what happened. It's definitely not what happened. Instead, it started World War I. Now, how did it start World War I? Well, because now you have a Serbian dude, a Serbian nationalist, assassinating the next heir to the Austro-Hungarian Empire. This will automatically bring into... So, by the way, this assassination happened in Sarajevo. You can go there today. I walked past it like 7 times. Honestly, I didn't even know what it was. It's so, you know, you can't really tell it's there. It's literally just a random street. But here is where Princip fired his gun at Archduke Franz Ferdinand. The bullet, the gunshot, which was heard all around the world. Because the Serb nationalists had assassinated the next heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, it brought into the conflict Russia, because Russia is an ally of Serbia. So now the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which declared war on Serbia, is also now at war with Russia. And because Russia declares war on the Austro-Hungarian Empire, it also brings Germany into the conflict, because Germany is an ally of the Austro-Hungarians. Therefore, it spirals out of control, and it ultimately leads and culminates into what we know now as the First World War. So the World War I ends, and Princip manages to get what he finally wanted, a Yugoslavian state. A Yugoslavia essentially means a South Slavic state. I mean, it only costed him 20 million souls, but hey, he's got it anyway. Princip is shortly killed for his crime. But this unification of Yugoslavia, so Yugoslavia consists of Bosnia, Croatia, Slovenia, Serbia. So now all of these regions are now put back together again. Well, not put back together again, but they are now under one united Slavic state. Please, by the way, if I do not make sense, please just ask me questions. This is a discussion, so... but this era of unification would not last long, because enter the Third Reich during World War II. This is Sarajevo during the 1940s. Notice the flag. So bear in mind, this is the very city in which the Ottomans had first entered. This is a city which the call to prayer, the Mu'adhin called out the praise of Allah, and now somehow it is scattered with swastikas. How on earth did that come about? Well, that came about because of Operation Barbarossa in 1941. So this is during World War II. The Nazis sort of now take over Western Europe, and they're now looking on to Eastern Europe, and they're looking on to the Soviet Union. And for some weird reason, they decide to invade the Soviet Union during the winter, which is a terrible idea because it's cold. But nevertheless, they do that, and they actually achieve great successes, and they manage to take almost all of Eastern Europe, or sort of have some sort of control over Eastern Europe. And a part of this invasion, Operation Barbarossa, it involved the occupation of Yugoslavia, the South Slavic state, which we mentioned before. This is a map of Yugoslavia during the war. So the Germans and the Italians wanted to ensure that the Yugoslavian state was divided. They wanted to make it as divided as possible, because divide and rule, it's the same with all empires. And they did this. So if you can notice here, can anyone tell me where Bosnia is? It's simply not there. Where can you see where it says Bosnia? This is the map of 1941. Where is Bosnia? It's not there. Because the Croatians, under the very fascist, very genocidal regime called the Ustasha, they had went to the Germans and went, listen, we will collaborate with you Germans, we will work with you, only if you give us what we want. And the Germans went, okay, fair enough, you can have the entirety of Bosnia. So Bosnia was literally given over to the Croatians. Now, this Ustasha regime is the flag in the middle, a very, very brutal regime. And it was so brutal that even the Nazis, when they visited the camps which the Ustasha had, they were perplexed. And if the Nazis are shocked at what you're doing, then you're definitely doing something wrong. So they would commit mass genocides. Alhamdulillah, they wouldn't commit genocides on the Muslims, but instead they would do it on the Serbs. So like I said, you had this long-lasting sort of conflict and rivalry between the Serbs and the Croatians. And so the Ustasha regime, the Croatians, they pillaged Serbian cities, wiped them almost out of existence. They did things which I pretty much cannot describe in this masjid. Very, very horrific things. And in response, the Serbs realized, okay, we're getting beaten up, we're getting absolutely erased from existence. Let's do something about this. So then we introduced the Chetniks, and these Chetniks is the flag right at the top, the black flag. And these Chetniks were a response to the Ustasha regime. Now, how does this relate to Muslims? What on earth are you talking about, Harris? This the Chetniks were a regime which, although they did combat and they did attack the Croatians, they also attacked Muslims because they had the idea that Muslims were these barbaric tribes from Turkey, from the Middle East, and they wanted to erase Muslim culture, Muslim religion from Bosnia. And like this, the Bosnians could not do much. So the Bosnians during the war, the Muslims during the war, they had to be collaborationist. And when I mean collaborationist, I mean working with Germany. And now they had to do this because they feared that if they would get themselves into their own independent state, then it would be a recipe for disaster. It would get them entangled within this conflict. So the Muslims remained collaborationist, and the Chetniks had actually killed roughly around 50 to 60,000 Muslims and Croats at the hands of the Chetniks. In total, during the Second World War, 316,000 Bosnians alone would die in the conflict, 160,000 being ethnic Serbs, and 75,000 being Muslims. Mosques were demolished, churches were demolished, and the flag right at the bottom, you may be thinking, how come you've not described what that flag is? That is Tito's partisans. Does anybody know who Tito is, or does anybody know about the partisans? Come on. Timon, you know. Correct, but what were the partisans? The partisans were a resistance forces, so these guys, they challenged everybody. They were communists, but they challenged both the Chetniks, the Ustasha, the Germans, the Italians. They essentially wanted to liberate Yugoslavia and bring it back together again under a unified state, under this brotherhood. So Tito, as you mentioned before, he was the leader, and he spearheaded this sort of campaign to unite Yugoslavia and to free it from its German occupation and its German rivals. And like this, Tito's partisans, this is a little map of where each of the flags were. So the Chetniks were in Serbia, the Ustasha regime in Croatia, and obviously Bosnia, because Bosnia was part of Croatia, and Tito's partisans in the southern side of Bosnia. So these are the Chetniks. Like I said, the Balkans had essentially turned on each other. This is Ustasha. This is Ustasha regime. Very, very brutal. One of the most brutal regimes in history, and that is good old Tito. So please do familiarize yourself with Tito's face, because he will be important for the Yugoslav Wars in the 1990s. So, like I said, the Balkans had turned on each other, but the war happily ends. Not happily, but it ends. And the Allies win, Germany is defeated, and Yugoslavia under Tito is now a new state. So essentially Tito had liberated Yugoslavia with the help of the Allies, and now forms what we all love, a Yugoslavian state, a South unified state which encompassed Bosnia, Serbia, Croatia, Slovenia, Kosovo, and Montenegro. So as you can see here, this is Tito's Yugoslavia. And he essentially, Tito was pretty much the Stalin of Yugoslavia. Stalin being the dictator of the Soviet Union. And essentially Tito, now of course, although he was very good in terms of uniting Yugoslavia, he was also very against Islam and against religion in general. So although it was not as bad as communism under Albania, under Enver Hoxha, or communism under Stalin in the Soviet Union, it was nevertheless still bad because Muslims could no longer be overtly Muslim. They had to practice it in secrecy. Mosques were kept intact, alhamdulillah, but there was this sort of this need to erase Islam from an indirect perspective. So Tito had encouraged Croatians to marry Serbians, Serbians to marry Muslims, Muslims would marry into Christian households. He did this because only shortly during World War II, the ethnicities had turned on each other, and he wanted to ensure that that would not happen again. So now, this would be a cause of why Bosnia, till this day, is a little bit secular in that sense, because Tito had issued this idea of secularism, and that religion was sort of outlawed. And like I said, Yugoslavia is now a socialist federal republic, which basically means it's communist. It was neither aligned with the West or the Soviet Union. It was its own entity in the Balkans. And, you know, the standard of living was improved in Yugoslavia, the expansion of education, you know, you had healthcare, unemployment benefits. Bosnia even became a tourist attraction, which is crazy because it's a communist nation. And in 1984, Sarajevo, the capital city of Bosnia, hosted the Winter Olympics. So Bosnia was the first communist nation to host the Winter Olympics in the Balkans. And, you know, it was a thing to be proud of. Having the Olympics in your own city is a thing to be proud of, and Bosnians felt proud of their country. The Yugoslavian state felt proud of their identity. But it would only be a matter of time until this utopia would come crashing down. Just a little picture of me, cringy picture of me, next to the only statue, or one of the only statues of Tito in the Balkans. It was quite the experience meeting good old Tito. This is the Winter Olympics. This is the bobsleigh track. So like I said, it was a thing to be proud of, but now it's left in ruins. Why is it left in ruins? We will discuss later on. But it's ajib. You know, being here, it's you have that sort of contrast between the old and the new. You have the graffiti, and then you have the old past, and then you're reminded of the Yugoslavia Wars, the war in Bosnia in the 1990s. And a lot of this is actually war-ruined, which will, like I said, we'll get onto later on. I want to keep this as short and concise as possible. But like I said, it would only be a matter of time until this utopia would come crashing down. So enter the Yugoslavia Wars in the 1990s. So this is a map of Bosnia. Please familiarize yourself with this map. Like I said, this bit's about to get complex and confusing, so please do make sure you're alert and paying attention. So the red is so this is the map of Bosnia. It's the ethnicities in Bosnia. So the red is the ethnic Serbs living in Bosnia. The green is the Bosniaks. When I say Bosniaks, I mean Muslims who are Bosnians. And the blue are the ethnic Croatians living in Bosnia. Now, whenever we tend to think about Bosnia, we think, oh, Bosnia is like 90% majority Muslim. It's not. It's actually only 51%. And the rest is made up of the Croats and the Serbs. They are the majority, or sort of the majority of the minority, if you can say that. The downfall. So... you know, not Sarajevo, Bosnia was a ticking time bomb. It has all of these different ethnicities. Of course, during Tito's reign, he really pushed for sort of brotherhood and unity and coexistence between these ethnicities. But it would only be a matter of time until Bosnia would become ruined with war. So the man who had held Yugoslavia from ethnic rivalry, the man who united the nation through the difficulties of the Second World War, dies in 1980. Tito is gone, and the glory days of Yugoslavia are no more. Can anybody tell me who that man in the black suit is? Correct. So he is at Tito's funeral in the 1980s. So people now, so this is one of the causes of the Yugoslav Wars. This coupled with the fall of the Berlin Wall, the wall which stretched across east and west. It divided capitalism and communism. It was the wall which defied the Cold War, and in 1989 it comes crashing down. People no longer want to be communists. People no longer like communism, and people are sort of starting to stray away from the idea of communism, and they're becoming more secular, more liberal. And like I said, you know, the Iron Curtain has fallen. And in 1991, the Soviet Union collapses. Many of you here may have experienced that unfold in your lifetimes. That is the first president of Russia, Boris Yeltsin. So now, like I said, people are straying away from communism, which therefore means Yugoslavia is a communist nation and it's next on the chopping board. So after Tito dies, there's obviously not one single figure to unite Yugoslavia. There is not one single figure to sort of keep them together, and therefore there was a need for a person to be the successor of Tito, someone to hold everybody together during these difficult times. And this man was none other than Slobodan Milosevic, the first of the absolute despicable war criminals that we have on today's list. That's his face, absolute despicable, evil, really evil human being. And the rest, if you think he's bad, just wait until we learn about the next two individuals. So, you know, he once again had this idea of a greater Serbian state. Now, I wonder when the last time someone had an idea of a greater Serbian state and led to a First World War. So his plan was doomed from the start. Essentially, he wanted to unite all the ethnic minority Serbs living throughout Yugoslavia, and he wanted to unite them all together. He also wanted to ensure Yugoslavia was kept intact and that nobody seceded. His first task... Sorry, I do need to have a little bit of water. Familiarize yourself with that map. and see where Serbia is on the map as well. So, Slobodan Milosevic, his first campaign was in Kosovo. So Kosovo and Vojvodina, which is directly above Serbia, these two were autonomous regions, but they were technically still part of Serbia. And Slobodan saw this opportunity. You know, communism is falling down. He knew that Yugoslavia was going to fall anyway, so he might as well pick apart the pieces of the breaking state. So he put together Kosovo and Vojvodina. So he sent the Yugoslav army. The Yugoslav army consists of almost all of the republics. So Bosnia had their own sort of unit in the Yugoslav army. But Slobodan, the Yugoslav army at this point was clearly sort of giving into the interests and the objectives of Slobodan Milosevic. And Serbia, under Slobodan Milosevic, the president of Serbia, he sent in the troops into Kosovo to cull them and to ensure that they were under the sphere of influence of Serbia. This was his first task. He would do the same to Vojvodina. He would install puppet governments in Montenegro, in Macedonia. Essentially, he wanted to make people friendly with him in order for him to be the successor of Yugoslavia. And you know, whilst Slobodan Milosevic was sending his troops into Kosovo, this was unheard of by the time. It was the first sort of military intervention in Europe in a very, very, very long time. And Slovenia, which is the most Western republic on the map, it's sort of closely entwined within the West. It's very secular, not secular, it's very liberal in the sense that there's freedom of press, there's freedom of criticism. So they could criticize, there was, TV stations would report on the intervention of Slobodan Milosevic into Kosovo. So Slovenia are reporting this war and going, okay, Serbia, you're doing a big crime here, you're invading Kosovo, and I'm pretty sure we agreed not to do that. I'm pretty sure we agreed to be one united state. And Slobodan turns around and goes, Slovenia, if you don't stop criticizing the Yugoslav state, because at the end of the day, when it comes to communism, you can't criticize the government, especially if you're a country and you allow the criticism of a government, that is a no-go in communism. So Slobodan and the pals, his cronies in Serbia, says, Slovenia, if you don't pay attention, if you don't stop mocking our intervention in Kosovo and Vojvodina and Montenegro, then we're going to have to send the Yugoslav army to deal with you. And Croatia, which is directly beneath Slovenia, was slightly worried as well, because they're like, okay, Yugoslav army are going to invade Slovenia. Okay, I'm going to secede from the Yugoslavian state. So now both Slovenia and Croatia are very distasteful of Slobodan Milosevic's sort of tactics and his ploys. So they now begin to sow the seeds of secession from Yugoslavia. They no longer wanted to be a part of it, and once again, like I said, communism was no longer popular. So Slobodan Milosevic, he sends in the Yugoslav army into Slovenia, and fortunately for the Slovenes, it was only a 10-day skirmish, which, you know, there was not a lot of conflict, but nevertheless there was some sort of fighting. But can anyone tell me why Slobodan had realized that, let me rephrase that. So Slobodan had realized that it no longer wanted to intervene in Slovenia. Can anyone tell me or have an idea why Slobodan didn't want to intervene in Slovenia after the 10-day skirmish? Why do you think? Have a look at where it is on the map and have a think about what Slobodan wanted. What did he want? Someone tell me.
United Yugoslavian state.
He also wanted a greater Serbian state. Have a look on the map. Where is Slovenia and where is Serbia?
Too difficult to control.
Nope.
He has to go through Bosnia and Croatia.
True as well. It has no ethnic Serbs in Slovenia. There are no ethnic Serbs in Slovenia. It's purely Slovenes. So he sort of was able, it wasn't of a big deal to let Slovenia pass. So he essentially said, okay, Slovenia, you can secede from Yugoslavia. We really don't care about you because, to be honest, you don't have any ethnic Serbs in it, and we don't have any interest in uniting the Serbs in Slovenia, because there's no Serbs in Slovenia. So Slovenia secede from Yugoslavia. It's the first nation to do so, and Croatia follows suit. But the thing with Croatia, it would not be spared, because Croatia, if you don't know, has 600,000 ethnic Serbs living in Croatia. Now, I just need to mention that. You're probably wondering why you're talking about Slovenia, Croatia, and Serbia. It will make sense, hopefully, inshallah, very, very soon. So President Tudjman, the president of Croatia, he is now very, very scared that Yugoslavia, the Yugoslav army under Slobodan Milosevic, is going to invade Croatia. He's very, very worried because it has 600,000 ethnic Serbs living in Croatia. And so Slobodan says, listen, if you stop trying to arm, so by the way, President Tudjman is arming himself because he's worried that the Yugoslav army is going to invade them. So he's creating his own paramilitaries, creating his own army. And Slobodan says, you are going against the Yugoslavian ideas of brotherhood. Stop creating your own army and come together as one united state, blah, blah, blah. And essentially, a series of events happened and the Yugoslav army was sent to Croatia. And this is where the Yugoslav Wars really fired off from. This is where ethnic cleansing was brought back to the peninsula of the Balkans, to Europe actually, since the World War II. And a quarter of Croatia would then be attacked by Serbia and would be under the control of the Serbs. And you see absolutely atrocious incidents happening in this time period. This is the time period of 1992 to 1995 and 1996. Just for one example, the region of Vukovar, a city, a region in Croatia, which was populated by Croats, was completely massacred. People were forcibly removed from their houses. Old women, men, hacked to death, chopped up into pieces and left on the streets of Croatia. This was ethnic cleansing, and this was the first sort of glimpse of how this Yugoslavian war was ought to be fought. This war which was fought with ethnic rivalry, ethnic tensions, and a war which would be accompanied with bloodshed and agony. And the Serbs, Slobodan Milosevic, as well as having the Yugoslav army, he also had paramilitaries. And the thing about paramilitaries you need to understand is that they are not actually accountable to anybody. So they can commit any atrocities that they want, and they are not exactly accountable to anybody. So they committed all sorts of atrocities to Croatia. But alhamdulillah for the Croatians, they had two operations which would relieve Croatia of the ethnic control of the Serbs. So Croatia has been then brought back, and is brought back to the post-war boundaries, which is good. But now Bosnia was next on the chopping board. And the Bosnian War, which had happened from 1992 to roughly around 1996. This is where things get confusing and rather complex, so please do pay attention and ask questions, like I said, if you are unsure. And so Bosnia, after witnessing war on its doorstep and the onslaught in Croatia, begin a referendum to secede from Yugoslavia in 1992, which it does. The man that you see here, in my opinion, is a hero for us Muslims. His name is Elijah Izetbegovic. He was the Bosniak president, the president of the Muslims during the time, and he did not give in to the Serb demands. So Bosnia wanted to secede from Yugoslavia because it doesn't want to be involved with the ethnic tensions and rivalry. But like I said before, Bosnia consists of ethnic Serbs. And these ethnic Serbs did not want to secede from Yugoslavia. They wanted to be united with their brothers in Serbia, like they always do. And you see, they didn't want to secede, and instead they wanted Bosnia to remain part of this Yugoslavian state. This then introduces our next absolute war criminal, Radovan Karadzic. He is the leader of the Republic of Srpska. Let us go back to the slide of the map. So the Republic of Srpska is the red regions. The Republic of Srpska is the ethnic minority, the ethnic Serbs in Bosnia, and they created the Republic of Srpska during the Bosnian War. And Radovan Karadzic, was the leader. He was the political leader of the Republic of Srpska. And once again, an absolutely despicable human being. There's really not much to say about him other than that he's a horrible person who is filled with ethnic rivalry and bigotry, and is one of the people who have been acclaimed to have been a war criminal during the war, and has a lot of deaths on his hands. So that's him, Radovan Karadzic. Is there a way of, because I want to see if the audio is picking up from my speakers, so just let me know if you can hear this, because this is quite important to understand. So this is what Radovan Karadzic said on the onset of the war. So the war was looming, and this is what Radovan Karadzic said. So just let me know if you can hear this, because this is very important.
They wanted Bosnia to
Can people at the back hear? Yes or no?
Where most Serbs lived. In Parliament, their leader issued a black warning.
Nemojte da mislite da nećete odvesti Bosnu i Hercegovinu u pakao, a muslimanski narod možda u nestanak. Jer muslimanski narod ne može da se odbrani ako bude rat ovdje.
Evo umjesto gospodina Janović, gospodin Zebegović.
Osjećao sam da se približava pakao ovaj i kao da su se vrata pakla na trenutak otvorila i kao da jedan jezik onoga plamena malo prešao preko ni svih u nas u tom trenutku.
So that's what Radovan Karadzic said about the Muslims before the onslaught of war. Now, so the Republika Srpska now want to do something about Bosnia leaving the Yugoslavia. But the thing is, they didn't have any arms. So what did? They turned to their pals, Serbia, Slobodan Milosevic. But because Bosnia was internationally recognized in 1992 as an independent state, if Slobodan Milosevic intervened using the Yugoslav army, it would essentially bring the UN directly into the conflict, and Slobodan Milosevic did not want that. He wanted to have the Balkan Wars as a sort of a war which was contained to the Bosnian Peninsula, the Balkan Peninsula. So Slobodan Milosevic, the absolute Machiavellian, cunning, conniving person that he is, he came up with a plan. So as you can see, the red lines is the Republika Srpska. So instead of sending the troops directly into Bosnia to arm the Republika Srpska, he instead decided to, listen to this, this is very important, you have to wrap your head around this bit. So he decided to transfer all of the Bosnian Serb units of the Yugoslav army to the ethnic Serbs in Bosnia. I'll repeat that again. Here's a little animation. He decided to move all the Bosnian Serbs of the Yugoslav army, that same Yugoslav army which consists of the different republics, he decided to move all those Bosnian Serb units to the Republika Srpska. So now what you have overnight, you have the Republika Srpska being very, very, armed with array of guns, munitions, artillery, tanks, things which the Bosniaks, the Muslims, did not possess. And like this, Karadzic would sort of use these weapons that he received from Slobodan Milosevic to intervene and to have a military aggressive stance against the Bosnians in order to fully wipe them off the coast of Bosnia, of the face of Bosnia. And what you see now is the city of Sarajevo, the same city which was the home of the Winter Olympics in 1984, the same city which heard the call to prayer of the Ottomans, the same city which was so involved with multiculturalism and diversity, now has war at the doorstep of Sarajevo, the siege of Sarajevo. So instead, to apply pressure, the Republika Srpska positioned artillery and battering rams around. So like I said before, Sarajevo is a valley, so they positioned these on the mountains of Sarajevo, on the peaks of Sarajevo, to fire and rain hell upon the civilians below. This was not strategic, by the way. This was purely to make them mad. And I wish I had a segment where one of the generals had yes.
At this stage, what was the response of the rest of the world?
What was the
Response of the rest of the world?
Inshallah, we'll get onto that. Yes, the UN and how they did a lack of we'll get into that inshallah later. But where was I? So they positioned artillery and they bombarded it. And one of the Serb commanders had literally instructed to target Muslim localities, because you've got to remember, Sarajevo also consists of Croats and Serbs. So the Republika Srpska was instructed by a man called Ratko Mladic. We'll get onto him later. He's the final war criminal. Spoiler alerts. He instructed the Bosnian Serbs to rain hell upon the citizens, the civilians, the innocent people down in the city of Sarajevo. And his exact words was to make them mad. Now imagine that. Civilians, this city, which like I said, it's such it was a prosperous nation, has now been tarnished with war and conflict. And I went to the positions in which the Serbs had bombarded the city of Sarajevo. This is me, climbing up. It's very, very high up in the hills and very, very foggy. And it's very, it's incredible being there, because you can study this all you like. But when you go to these locations and when you just sit there and just think about what happened at these spots, how these spots became the battering rams for the civilians below, how night was turned into day with the flashes of artillery, how children and mothers and fathers would be bombed to blitz. It's incredible being at these locations. And this is me giving a small little talk about what happened at the artillery. Hopefully you can hear. Like I said, if you can't hear anything, just let me know. It was heavily bombed. Sarajevo wasn't just bombed every day. 1,000 artillery shells each day was flung upon the city in strategic locations. And when I say strategic locations, I mean cultural heritage sites. The Bosnian Serbs knew this tactic was a way of ethnically decreasing and ethnically cleansing any sign. Sure it is. No, it's not. I'll try it, inshallah. Listen, like I said, it's my first attempt at this, so I do apologize for any technical difficulties. Let's just play that.
It was heavily bombed.
There we go.
Sarajevo wasn't just bombed every day. 1,000 artillery shells each day was flung upon the city in strategic locations. And when I say strategic locations, I mean cultural heritage sites. The Bosnian Serbs knew this tactic was a way of ethnically decreasing and ethnically terminating and cleansing any signs of Bosnian culture. They wanted to absolutely erase this city off the map. They wanted to level it completely flat, and to do that they needed to bombard it, they needed to create this psychological fear, they needed to divide the ethnicities down below. But that is not what happened. They endured this absolute hell. Night was turned into day with flashes of artillery shells flung into buildings, absolutely bombarded into public walking spaces, roads. There was not an inch of Sarajevo that was left untouched by the Bosnian Serbs. Each wall you see in the city, each road you see in the city, you see the effects of this war. And this behind me, this place where I'm right now, this is what the darkest chapter is all about.
So, like I said, it's very emotional being there. I went to a few of these Serb artillery HQs.
It was heavily.
And this is the and Ajib. Being in this spot, you can hear the adhan being called, and I'll show you my quick reaction to it. So, like I said, you know, the same place. Had it not been for the civilians who endured the living hell, had it not been for them enduring 4 years of a siege. Now, can anyone explain what a siege actually is? Anybody? Come on. Simple question. What is a siege, guys? Come on. But what is the definition of a siege? Not just artillery, but what is a siege? Essentially nothing goes in or out of the city. Everything is blockaded. No one can get supplies in to the city or out of the city. And this city now was ravaged with poverty, with hunger. People would die out of starvation. And this wasn't just for a week. This wasn't for 2 weeks. This was for 4 brutally long years. Can you imagine that for 4 years, living in this environment, this nightmare? And when you walk through Sarajevo now, you see these buildings like this almost everywhere. Like this, you can see the bullet holes everywhere. Every single city, like I said before, has bullet holes ravaged within them, and you can't escape it. You literally can't escape it. And the first day that I came there, the only thing I noticed was just bullet holes, bullet holes, bullet holes, bullet holes. And you know, it's like I said, it's difficult to take in, but yeah. So this is Sniper Alley. I won't play this video, but essentially from this alley, the Serbs would position up snipers, and they would shoot and kill anybody. Regardless if you were military personnel, children, women, men, anybody they would shoot along this long stretch of land. It's famously known as Sniper Alley. And the saddest thing about this is that these civilians trying to get about their daily lives during the siege would be shot, would be killed, and unfortunately, imagine if you were walking with your mother or your father and you had to cross this road and your mother or your father was shot. You couldn't pick that person up, you couldn't drag them out for safety because then you'd be sniped yourself. So these bodies would be left here in the streets of Sniper Alley for a very long period of time, and unfortunately these bodies would be rotting and would be dazzling in the sun. And this is the tragedy that was this city, this alley. And like I said, once again, like everything, it's sad being here and actually experiencing and looking at the buildings, which by the way are still artillery shelled. Along the city. And also a fun, well, not really fun, but a very horrific fact about this is that the West, so vigilantes from UK, vigilantes from the Americas, had traveled all the way to Sarajevo to help the Bosnian Serbs shoot these people as if it was a hunting game, as if it was some sort of sport, shooting children. 60 children would be shot just on this alley, and 1,500 would be killed in total. These are not military personnel. I can understand military personnel dying, but these are civilians, average day people, and they will be shot and killed by vigilantes like this. And you know, when you're a sniper, you know exactly what you're shooting at. You know exactly who you're aiming at and what the consequences of that bullet is. And like this, they absolutely created this psychological fear within the hearts of everybody in the city. And this is on Sniper Alley. You can see the bricks. That's essentially, they just patched it up. They've not even demolished the building. How do you know if that's safe or not? I have no idea. It's one of them things that you can't comprehend. This is Sniper Alley. Huge stretch of road. And the saddest thing is that the people who lived during the siege have to walk past this alley almost every single day. The places where they saw their mothers get shot, the places where they saw their children get shot, they have to walk past this on an average daily basis. So the survivors. And when I mention survivors, pretty much almost everybody was a survivor. Well, not everybody. Essentially, the people who you see on the street, the old people that you see on the street, even the young people like this person here, they are all survivors of the siege. And this brother, his name is Mirza. Really, really, really inspiring individual. I became good friends with him. He took me around and showed me the Bosnian culture, the food, etc. Honestly, I haven't met a single person like him in my life, and he's an inspiration to me. This is his story.
Tell me, do you have anybody here that you know buried here?
We have like a common sentence here in Bosnia that every single family has, or actually had, a member who was killed during the war and who is somewhere in some cemetery. For example, my uncle was killed also. He's not in this cemetery, but he's buried like so close to here. So many families have their own shaheeds inside of family.
And you said you mentioned how you recognize some of the names here.
Yeah. Because if you go to school, if you pass through educational system, you can see some surnames and it's really familiar to you, and after you get in a talk with people, you recognize that someone's uncle or aunt or brother was killed during the war.
And were you born before the war?
And this is Nadim Babic. This is my favorite masjid. This is the room which they actually prayed in. I met him and I spoke to him. This is his story. So he was 13 years old during the siege of Sarajevo.
So what is your name?
Nadim Babic, and I was born in 1978 in Sarajevo. I'm 13 years.
And what do you remember? Do you remember having to stay inside, or how did it affect you? What exact things?
I was a child. I play, and I know when bombing stopped, we go to the street to play a little bit, and after the siren, we have to go to basement, and this old city is famous because there are a lot of mosques, and the most population was a Muslim, and this part of the city was the most grenaded.
And
so essentially what he just said is that the Serbs directly attacked a mosque and demolished mosques. Most of the mosques that you see in Sarajevo, unfortunately, have been rebuilt. So these mosques, which were around for 500 years, have now been bombed. This is another survivor. This, funny enough, his name is Haris, spelt the same way as mine, and he's a history teacher. He was a friend of mine. Alhamdulillah, he took me to Srebrenica, one of the most surreal experiences of my life. This is what he said. He was alive during the siege. Once again, he was a child.
For the protection and such, And my first memories are from there, that we were playing, and such. And then after that, I didn't understand it. And I remember that my mom told us, not just us, because there were many kids, and she told us, like, don't go out, you can't go out. And once I sneaked out, and she saw me, and she was like, I told you to stay inside, why did you go outside? But as a kid, I didn't understand what she meant, but now I understand, because there was a possibility that, the village will be shelled, and that's it.
Wow.
But that's not actually the saddest thing. The saddest thing that came after the war, because, I don't know, most of the people think that the war is the worst thing, but in my personal case, I think it's not, because after the war, you have to deal with everything. You have to, how to say that, you have to psychologically accept what happened, and then you need to deal with all the
So the running theme here with the survivors of the siege of Sarajevo is that they didn't have a childhood. At least the people who I spoke to. There are tons of people who I spoke to, but I don't have time to put it into this presentation. And I do apologize if this is going longer than is expected, but inshallah we are almost towards the end. And just a few statistics on the siege of Sarajevo very, very quickly. 35,000 buildings destroyed. The Serb forces specifically targeted cultural heritage sites, hospitals, medical centres, communication centres, markets. For 1,245 days, Sarajevo was cut off from the world and its residents faced a series of terror. 50,000 were injured, 11,000 murdered, 1,600 being children. 51% of children had seen someone killed. 40% had been directly shot. 40% of children had been directly shot. That's almost half of the children in Sarajevo had been shot. 73% had their homes attacked or shelled, and 19% had witnessed a massacre. These children who were brought up during the siege had no childhood. And the individuals who I spoke with, the running theme is that there was no childhood. There was nothing. They could not have a childhood like we have here in the West. And honestly, going from there and coming back to England, that day when I came back to England, I walked through the streets and I looked around the buildings around me and I saw no bullet holes and I almost started to cry. Because you can't sympathize with the people who endured this. And the impacts, like he said, it's not just the war which was the impact, it was the afterwards, dealing with the stress, dealing with the psychological trauma of the war. And walking down the streets of England, having not seen bullet holes was a complete relief for me, and it just makes me so grateful to live in a country where we are not ravaged by war. So somehow, the 1990s was propelled back in time to medieval Barbary. During the Serb capture of cities to instill fear within the Muslims, they reignited long-distant memories and long-distant ideas of a crusade. Meet the war criminal Ratko Mladic. He was the commander of the Bosnian Serb army, and he was nicknamed the Butcherer of Bosnia. Once again, despicable human being. He was probably the worst out of all of them. Now we will move on to Srebrenica. From July 1995, 8,372 men and boys were rounded up and killed in mass firing squads. 20,000 expelled from their homes. Hundreds upon thousands of women abused in ways unimaginable. Europe saw concentration camps on its soil for the first time since the Holocaust. Hundreds of years of Islamic civilization in just this one city, completely wiped. Now it remains a ghost town, a town which remains almost void of its Muslim population. This town is Srebrenica, a supposed UN safe zone, created to protect the refugees fleeing the war. And actually, this is the picture of Srebrenica on the right, and I swear to God, almost this is identical of how it looks like now. So this is during the war. This is straight after the Serbs had conquered it. As you see, towards the sort of right, you will see a bombed-out building. I promise you, I walked past that building, and it looks exactly the same. This building has been left untouched since the war. Everything is damaged. Well, not everything, but you can still see the remnants of this war. And there's a darker element to this as well, which we will discuss later on. This is a CNN clip of the Srebrenica massacre.
Karadic's forces killed her brother in Bratunac, but his arrest put focus elsewhere on his main alleged crime, the worst massacre since World War II, Srebrenica. It was the first safe area created for Bosnia's persecuted Muslims, but Karadic's army paid little mind to these blue helmets and their promise of safety. After the March Directive, Bosnian Serb forces imposed a stranglehold on the enclave. And by July, people were starving. The 600 Dutch peacekeepers here, charged with protecting the enclave, came under fire.
So all throughout this conflict, the UN, the international community, twiddled their thumbs as Bosnia was under attack, under siege, under ethnic cleansing and genocide. And they had actually imposed a embargo on arms to the Bosnian Muslims. So they not only did they not intervene and help them, but they also stopped them from buying arms to defend themselves against the military aggression from the Republic of Srpska. Now, so as mentioned in that clip, it was a UN safe zone. Srebrenica was a UN safe zone because there were so many refugees, roughly around 20,000 refugees, and the UN had promised, okay, we will make this a safe zone only if you grant us all your weapons. So the Muslims had to give them their weapons, and they promised the individuals in this city, they had promised them safe refuge, they had promised them safety, but unfortunately that's not what happened. And the UN forces were absolutely redundant, useless, and as the Serb forces encircled the city of Srebrenica, as you can see here on the left, that is the blue is the UN safe zone, and the Serb forces encompassed and surrounded the city, and slowly, day by day, they moved towards Srebrenica, the city, and despite being a UN safe zone, they ignored it completely and moved into the city. And the enclave was surrounded. So this is me at one of the masjids. There are 3 masjids in the city of Srebrenica. Only one of them is in operation, and this one, the reason that there is only one in operation is because there's simply nobody there. This is one of the masjids, and even this masjid is completely empty.
I am here at one of the mosques here in Srebrenica, and this mosque and other mosques in this city were absolutely razed to the floor. They were bombarded with shells, purposely targeted in order to remove Bosnian culture, in order to remove the same culture, the same Islamic religion and culture which had been prevalent in Bosnia for 500 years. And this mosque that I'm in right now was bombed, straight up just bombed to the floor. And it was rebuilt after the war and is now looking very nice and modern, but also empty, completely empty. And it's the same with everything in this city. It's just horrifically silent and empty in a ghost town.
So this is what Radovan Karadzic, the commander of the Bosnian Serb units, said upon entering Srebrenica, the place which was supposed to be a UN safe zone, which was filled with refugees. This is what he said, the absolutely twisted imbecile that he is. So he orders for the flag to be taken down, and this is what he said upon entering the city.
Evo nas 11. jula 1995. godine u srpskoj Srebrenici. Uoči još jednog velikog praznika srpskoga, poklanjamo srpskom narodu ovaj grad i napokon došao je trenutak da se posle bune protiv Dahija Turcima osvetimo na ovom prostoru.
Can you notice how he said the Turks? So once again, this ethnic rivalry, this desire to wipe out the Muslims of Bosnia. And this is me walking through the streets, the empty streets of Srebrenica. You can see a war in, literally just there, a bombarded building. Completely empty city. You know, it looks beautiful when you go up to the top and have a look at the city from above, but it's just empty and it's a ghost town. And it's sad because it was once a prosperous, it was one of the biggest it had a factory, and that factory was one of the most famous in Yugoslavia at the time, but unfortunately. This is Brother Najdav Avcı. This is one of the most heartbreaking persons that I spoke to on this trip. He was one of the survivors, the very few survivors of this massacre, of the firing squad. So essentially what happened was the men and women were split up. The women were put into very, very poor housing, literally open air prison. They were shoved into these camps, not concentration camps. The women weren't, well, technically you can call them concentration camps, but the men were definitely put into concentration camps. And I will show you some pictures, very, very, very horrific images. You think that it's from World War II, from the Holocaust, but it's not. It's literally only from 27 years ago from today. And this man, so what they did was they got all the men. They didn't leave one alive. They got all of them in, all 8,000 of these people, and day and night they had shifts, 24/7 shifts. They lined them up and sprayed them, shot them. And not only did they do that, but let's imagine, now this is an actual scenario which happened. You have your brother on one side and you have your father on one side. As little as 16 years old, these people were brought into the fields and shot. And let's imagine your father is now shot, he's on the floor, your brother is now shot on the floor, and now they would leave you alive, because what they would do now is that they'd make you pick and track up your own father's body, and they'd make you put them into the trucks and shove them into the forests. And imagine bringing your own dead father's body, bringing them and dragging them and putting them into the like almost their inert body into the bushes, and then obviously then they would shoot you. And this is a brother who, only Allah can know what he went through. Only Allah can know what he went through. But I met him here. This is the Qabristan of Srebrenica. I got in contact with him before via email. It took me a while to find his email address, but I'm very, very glad, and inshallah you can benefit from the words that he says.
A few sentences before. Yeah, we came here to find shelter in protected zone, and we thought it will be everything okay, but unfortunately it wasn't so. In July 1995 I was loaded together with other men and boys on the trucks, and we driven in different direction, and later we put in one school, and during the night all the people were killed. I survived the massacres together with other my friend, if I can say so, and two of us survived the mass executions in one village near town of Zornik, around 50 kilometers from here. What to say about that? It is very difficult to talk about that, of course, and you know, because I could never imagine that I could survive, because it was not possible to survive. Everywhere around us, Serb police and Serb soldiers, and in the end, I was probably when I saw the dead people around in front of me and the people who were dying, I was shocked. And I don't remember when I was hit, but I was hit, in fact, in my stomach with 3 bullets in my right arm and in my left foot. At the time, I just wanted to die, and I prayed God to die, but I didn't dare to call the soldiers to kill me, and because everywhere around me people were dying, and they started to check the bodies, and less and less voices could be heard. And
just imagine these people, going to the Qabristan, just imagine these people on the Day of Judgment. When Allah asks them, what did you do for Islam? They can say that they died for Islam. How many of us can say that we've done anything remotely similar to that? And I can just imagine the day, on the Day of Judgment, with Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam giving them the water from his palms to these people who strived and who died for Islam. You may say, oh, they don't look like Muslims, the Bosnians aren't religious. But they died for Islam, and they were willing to, when it came to putting their lives on the line, they did that. And that's exactly what they did. And please, after this talk, or if you want to do it now, please recite 3 Ikhlas or some sort of dua or anything, just to remember our brothers, our Muslim brothers, our sisters who died. And not only were the brothers massacred, but the women were also raped. And this is one of the pictures of the concentration camps. So these people weren't taken to These people weren't taken to some sort of faraway fields in the middle of nowhere. They were brutally murdered right here in their very own homes. The very places which they walked past on a daily basis. These places, once having no real meaning or importance or significance, merely just bushes on the side of a road, of a field, now they screen the pain of those forgotten victims. Now they are drenched in blood. Can you imagine that? It wasn't bad enough, the population who fled and after the war they came back, not only did they have to deal with walking past these locations in which they saw their brothers being shot, they saw their women being raped, but now they have to live in this city which is now currently run under the Republika Srpska. It is under the control of Republika Srpska. A once majority Muslim town is completely wiped off. And this would be the case for many of the towns here in Bosnia. As you can see here, this is not just one massacre or mass onslaught of Muslims. This would happen in Švornik, Visegrad, Voka, and Prešenin. And like I said, the war ravaged throughout the entirety of Bosnia. It wasn't just in one particular region, but I'm trying to give you some sort of case studies to understand the conflict better. And the end of the war comes to a very silent and bitter halt. With the efforts of the Croats, the Bosniak forces, and the UN and NATO bombing campaigns. By the way, the NATO decided, okay, yeah, I think we should be doing something about this war. Which, okay, fine, good, but you've had to wait 5 years to do this. But eventually they issue Operation Deliberate Force in 1994, or sort of during the end of the conflict. And Sarajevo, the city which was under siege, is finally relieved after 4 years of warfare and conflict. The Dayton Agreements, which was the agreements made after the Yugoslav Wars, the Bosnian War, was signed, which would be the final solution to the Bosnian War. But the war never really ended. As you see on the map, which I will show you now, this is the borders before on the left, and this is the borders on the right. What can you notice here? Well, what you can notice is that on the right, Srebrenica is actually about 3 hours away from Sarajevo. It's on the right, it's on the east. You can see that long stretch, if you look on the map on the left, you can see that long stretch of green. That's the Bosnian Muslims. Now, if you look on the right, in 1998, that is now an ethnic majority Serb area. So it was completely erased. It was completely wiped out of the Muslim culture. And had it not been for the army of the Bosnians, had it not been for the Muslim Bosnians who resisted the military aggression which was enforced upon them, the entirety of Bosnia, the last sort of stronghold of Muslims in Europe, would be wiped out completely. Had it not been for these mujahideen, okay, I'm going to use the J word, mujahideens. Had it not been for these people, Europe and Bosnia would be void of its Islamic culture, its Islamic population. And these are the true heroes. These are the true heroes of this of the darkest chapter. And also you can see in the top left on the 1991 map, you see a little bit of greenery. That has now become a part of the Republika Srpska. So like I said, the Dayton Agreements didn't solve anything. It simply froze the conflict at the borders at 1995. And Republika Srpska now, till this day, has majority control over these regions. And genocide denial is extremely, extremely common. And it's crazy because the world utters any sort of rejection or denial against the Holocaust, but when it comes to the genocide which took place here in Bosnia, the Serbs who live in Srebrenica, they wave. So I was there in Srebrenica, and that's under Republika Srpska. And as you drive through Republika Srpska, you see these flags. You see the flags of Ratko Mladic, the same commander of the Bosnian Serb forces. Can you imagine in this city that Muslims were systematically tortured, raped, and abused and murdered? The same Serb flag which was waved during the Yugoslav Wars are waved in the spots and the locations which Muslims would be killed in. The Republika Srpska still dominates the borders between Serbia, and the Bosniaks have little representation here, and they are pretty much second-class citizens. And the war sites and the places which the massacres happened are turned into rubbish tips, graffiti glorifying the war criminals. And not only being murdered was bad, but they now had no option but to carry on living with the very people who decapitated their families. Women walking past the same Serb soldiers in the street. These same Serb soldiers who raped and abused them, yet they cannot do a single thing about them because the Republika Srpska does nothing about this genocide denial. Of course, I do have to clarify that there is no actual fighting going on in the region at the time in terms of military, but the psychological warfare has been as prevalent as it was back then. So this is me at the Republika Srpska, the boundary. Okay, it's just a sign. And this is driving through Republika Srpska. We drove about 6 hours through Republika Srpska.
So some of these buildings have, they look like they've been bombed, is that true?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. You will see that the closer we get to Srebrenica, the more than you will see more of them. Yeah.
So this is a Bosnian.
And the saddest thing about these war ruins and these shelled-out houses is that the more you see them, the more you become normalized to them. And this is the reality for the Bosnians living in Sarajevo and the other cities like this. They've become so used to conflict that it's become normal. And this is a Serb flag. They are scattered everywhere, everywhere. So notice the Serb flag there, the blue, red, white. Isn't that confusing? Because you're in Bosnia, yet you're seeing the flag of Serbia. How does that make any sense? It doesn't make any sense. That's the thing. And it's sort of them rubbing it in the face of Muslims that, we killed you. It's that silly, it's that absolutely pathetic. And the world does nothing. The world, nobody knows about this. Even us, Muslims, we have no idea that this is still taking place to this day. And so the Republika Srpska, the entity which was created during the war, is still a real entity. It's now an autonomous region in Bosnia, but it still is very much part of Bosnia. The Dayton Agreements, like I said before, never truly solved the issue, and once again it merely froze it. It just froze it, waiting for one more barbaric war criminal, one more evil human being to continue sparking the fire of this ethnic crusade. And that's why neighbours never really take their eyes off one another in this country. And, you know, the stark limbo that the Balkans find themselves in. There's a lot of speculation whether the next war which will happen in Europe, obviously we have the Ukrainian war, the next few wars that people predict which will happen is in Bosnia. They predict that the Republic of Srpska will secede from Bosnia and there will be a very bloody combat warfare. And also Kosovo, which inshallah maybe sometime in the future I might make a piece on, inshallah. But I hope so badly that I'm wrong. I hope that this will not be a new era of conflict in Bosnia. Because from an institutional and even educational level, the children are being pumped with the lies that these war criminals, Ratko Mladic, Slobodan Milosevic and Karadzic, they claim that these people aren't war criminals, they're war heroes. And they taught this in schools. So the foundations are set. Whether someone is brave enough to raise the hammer of genocide once more is only a matter that time will tell. I wish I could speak more on this topic, but inshallah, you know, there's a lot to discuss and there's a lot of questions that I think people want to ask. And I also don't want to take much of your time. So I felt compelled to give this speech, and I'm not very articulate and I'm not very good in terms of giving talks and such. I'm quite a reserved person, but you know, when Nadim, the person who I interviewed in the mosque in the small room, who was a survivor of the siege, before I departed him on my final day in Bosnia, he turned around to me and he said, "Haris, promise me one thing." And I said, "Yes, of course, I will promise you. What can I do for you?" And he told me that, "Promise me that when you go back to England, you tell the world about Bosnia's chapter. You tell the world about Bosnia's darkest chapter and how Bosnia is imminently about to enter a new phase, a new darkest chapter." And he told me that please spread awareness about this conflict, and that is why I am here today. And I'm informing you of the genocides which took place against our Muslim brothers and sisters. So please do you have any questions? I will discuss the UN buffer zones if we have time later. Do you want me to discuss it now? Yeah. So this is a UN buffer zone in the peaks of Igman. That is me. Another cringy photo. But this region was put under, so this is in Sarajevo. This was put under UN buffer, this was put under UN control. Essentially there was a ceasefire because there was a lot of conflict happening, and the fact that Igman was actually very, very close to the international airport of Sarajevo. And the international airport in Sarajevo was under the control of the UN. They had to sort of keep it under their control in order to ensure, you know, a safe passage of supplies. Now, below Igman, these peaks in Sarajevo, lies a tunnel which stretches from the international airport to the city of Sarajevo, and through this, the Muslims were able to supply the city, which was under siege secretively. And also on the picture on the left, you see, on the right, you see a mosque, and this mosque is literally in the middle of nowhere, in the peaks of Igman, and this was built by the Bosnian army, and they built it, and it was called the War Mosque. So even during these times, by the way, the temperatures here get up to minus 30 degrees, in the winter. So, you know, as well as having the thought and the need and the sort of the focus on fighting, they also had Islam intertwined within their beliefs. They had Islam at the forefront of their campaign to ensure that Bosnia was not completely wiped off the map. And it's crazy being here because, you know, also on the picture on the left, you can see that this was once the ski slopes of the 1984 Olympics, and now it became a UN buffer zone. And if you look on the black watchtower, you can actually see the white writings of the UN. That is not, that is actually the original writings. That is the original sign. So the UN had stationed a sort of a watchtower there. And obviously it was redundant because the Serbs broke the ceasefire anyway and began shelling the city once more again. And, you know, knowing that what these people went through. When I heard the adhan, the echo for the first time throughout the valley, I could not help myself but cry. Instead, you know, without these brave heroes, the adhan would be absent. Without these brave heroes, it would be replaced with aching silence. Because they were ready to die for this cause, to preserve Islam from being wiped out from Europe, these brave men, women, and children did what many of us will never have the opportunity to do. Jazakallah khair. Any questions that you want to ask? Any questions? Anybody? Anything that you want me to clear? Well, Jazakallah khair. If you do have any questions, and if you do want to watch the documentary, which, yes, of course. Yeah.
I think Jazakallah for giving such a good presentation, and especially for something that's literally on our doorstep in Europe.
Of course.
And I think it's sad indictment on our us, we don't really know much about it.
Of course.
So Jazakallah for showing us and the presentation. I just want to go back, I think you mentioned about the school children being taught about the
Of course, yes.
Serbs. Are there school children within Bosnia being taught on the Serbian side?
Only in the Republika Srpska they are taught that these are war heroes. But in Bosnia itself, it's very mixed, because even in the Bosniak-controlled territories, you do have Serbs living in the regions. And once again, although the Serbs were responsible for the war, we can't dehumanize all of them. Like people do with Islam, we can't dehumanize all of the Republika Srpska and all of the Serbs living in Bosnia. So I just need to sort of clarify that.
And are there many Muslims within the Srpska part?
Yes. We drove past a few Bosniak territories. Where municipalities they're called, but other than that they're completely empty, because why would you want to live in the Republika Srpska, a place where the Muslim children have to go to different separate schools outside of the Republika Srpska, because the parents can't trust their children being taught that these people were war heroes.
And one last question is, how much of a boiling pot are we talking about? Are we looking at potential conflict going forward, or is it still fairly peaceful, contained, or?
We're looking at it's looking very, very bleak, in my opinion. People have different opinions on it, but I think it's looking very bleak. I don't know, only Allah knows whether a conflict will erupt here again, but like I said, just being there and seeing the ethnic tensions, it's not far-fetched to claim that something is on the horizon. Yes. Around 50 to 60,000, but it's still disputed, and even with 50,000, 50 to 60,000. And even with Srebrenica, they're still finding bodies of mass graves, because the Serbs, not only did they kill the Muslims and bury them in mass graves, but they dug them out and they had to hide them because they knew the international community would find these. So they put them in tertiary graves, secondary graves, and this is how they tried to cover up. But alhamdulillah, Allah is the best of planners, and He showed us where all the Muslims were buried. Any more questions? Like I said, I wish I could speak more about this topic, and a lot of the interviews which I haven't shown here today will inshallah be part of the documentary which I'll be producing. Stay tuned in the year 2063 when I manage to get this documentary out. But inshallah one day I will be able to publish it, and you can have a look for yourself. It will be a much more polished version of it. And if you have any questions, you can send me a WhatsApp message or email me. But Jazakallah khair for staying for quite a long time. Jazakallah khair. Thank you. Yes.
Your final version?
Yeah, yes.
Spread.
Oh, of course, spread the awareness.
Well, thanks for the talk.
No problem. Jazakallah for staying. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. I appreciate it so much. Jazakallah, I appreciate that. I do video this is why I'm
speakers on the site. Yeah. They don't want to think it wasn't about last week's exam. Because it's the fan. It's not, it's everywhere. Yeah, but just play. See it? Yeah. Aklebi said. Yeah, probably. Aklebi said.
Thank you so much for staying. Honestly, we